So hello, I'm Tucker Calloway. I'm the CEO of Mezmo, and I'm joined with Bill Meyer, who's a principal sales engineer at Mezmo. Bill's online due to certain travel challenges that a lot of people, I think, here face in the last couple of days as well. So thanks for having us back. We're super excited to be here. I think last time we were the first time doing a particular format. Now we're the first time doing the app field day. So super excited about that and appreciate you continuing to try stuff on us. So, Bill, if you don't mind going to the first slide, since we're going to have to coordinate across the United States here. Just want to give everyone just a quick level set on Mezmo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us through just a quick overview of the company and how we got to where we are today. And then Bill's going to drill down into some of the technology, product and use cases about how we think about application development with Mezmo and how we think about troubleshooting applications and enabling people to restore service faster when it comes to application outages and things like that. So Mezmo has been solving observability problems since 2015. So we've been at this for a while. Good to see you. We index over like 5 petabytes. So it's not we take in way more than 5 petabytes. We index and store about 5 petabytes a month. And we've got over 11,000 active users and over 80 contract enterprise customers. The point of all this is we've been doing a lot with telemetry data for a long time. And with that, we've been working with some of the largest organizations in the world. We're actually the back-end logging provider for the IBM cloud. So we're deployed in like 13 global data centers with them, handling all their internal and external customers, and then a number of innovators as well. What we've learned over this period of time, and one of the things we'll focus on today, is there's really 3 pillars that we think about in engaging with our customers. That's helping them understand their telemetry data, helping them optimize their telemetry data, and respond to the changing needs of that telemetry data. But before I get into that, the next slide talks about what is telemetry data. It's actually interesting. We refer to telemetry data a lot internally. You may have different orientation on what that is. What I mean by telemetry data and what it means in the context of Mezmo is your typical kind of like MELT metrics, like metrics, events, logs, and traces. We actually can take in other events too. We do OT type data as well, but primarily what we're talking about is metrics, logs, and traces when we talk about telemetry data. The other way I describe it too is it's basically any data that's created by a machine. Now, what's interesting about that, and I think everyone in the room and probably most people on the line know, is telemetry data is unique. It is different than business data, right? It is not the same thing. It has a way different characteristics. It has different moods than typical business data. And so we see this massive growth in the amount of data. And on the right, there's a couple facts and figures there. But on the right, the core problem that we see in the telemetry data space is that the cost of the data, the amount of data is growing linearly, but the value people get out of it is not. And that is like a fundamental problem. And we think that's necessitating a shift in the way people think about observability, in the way they think about cybersecurity. I think it will ultimately play a role in when we think about telemetry data fueling AI, LLMs, and things like that. And so we believe that over the course of the next 2 to 5 years, there's going to be a massive shift in the way people think about that telemetry. And the net of it is, we believe that organizations need to own their own telemetry data. They need to no longer advocate that ownership to the vendors they work with. You can't just keep it in a vendor format. You can't have them collect it and manage it for you and store it in their cloud. You need to actually take control of your data so you can do the things with it that are the most useful to you and your company. Okay, so there's a number of other elements there, but no, you're right, Bill. You're right on. You nailed it. The telemetry pipeline is the capability that we've been working on for the last 2 years. And the telemetry pipeline to me represents that shift in control point. When you make that decision that you need to own your own data, you need to own the collection, routing, transformation of that data. And so we see this new control point rising up within the enterprise right now. And there's been a lot of really good articles written by IBC and Gartner and some of you all from our last time here, which we really appreciate. But it's this idea that we take this control point and we route the data to the right location, and that we can manage, normalize, enrich, transform, route, and do all the things with the data that matters to your enterprise, and that you're beholden to some of these vendors. This is just a sample of inputs and outputs of what a telemetry pipeline would be. And we are one of those outputs potentially as well too. So on the next slide, I wanted to drill into our approach a little bit. We started with this notion of like, this is all about optimization. And I think that sounds well and good, but like what's happening is that people who are controlling the data, people who generate a lot of this data oftentimes are application developers, and the people who are trying to manage the data at the other end are oftentimes platform engineers and SREs, and those two they lack the ability to communicate about what data. And so we find them stepping on each other quite a bit. There's also this notion of, I want to enrich and transform or reduce that data. That's predicated on the assumption that you understand your data. And we found that the biggest bottleneck in the enterprise it was the desire to optimize was there, but the ability to understand was not. And so we've focused a lot of our approach on helping people understand, profile their data, detect repetitive patterns and redundant patterns. And essentially what we're doing here is we're taking data engineering best practices and we're tailoring them to telemetry data and enabling the different personas that engage with telemetry data. So when we think about the understand phase, we think about identifying the top opportunities for optimization, but also we have the ability to do in-stream aggregation of metrics. So typically all your aggregation will happen at a destination in a storage capability. So you've got to put all that data there and then you aggregate it. We can aggregate in-stream. So you can get rolling windows of aggregated data to prevent the need to store that or to give you earlier insights. When we move to the optimize phase, there are like many people who do the optimize phase, but that allows you to route, enrich, transform, relatively straightforward tasks. And then we're also very proud of what we've done in the respond phase, and Bill's going to dig into this too. And I think this is especially important in the context of troubleshooting and deploying applications. What happens is typically you understand your data, you make these optimization decisions, and then the context changes, right? You have an outage, you have a security, you're under attack or something like that, and the things you thought you needed change when you move into those responsive type stages. And so we have the ability to dynamically change and change the profile of the optimizations based on the context that's being received. So we'll talk to you about that today too.
Yeah. Would you include or consider, I'm sure you have considered that, or highlight the fact that sometimes people make changes to the application, which causes performance degradation, or, it's just a bad change, right?
Yeah.
Memory utilization, cleanup processes aren't applied, indexing isn't done, performance, or load balancing or whatever isn't being handled properly in the latest update. Would you consider that part of changing?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in fact, I'm actually glad you kind of stimulated that topic of change too, because the change, which really defines context in a lot of ways, happens so often, especially in an app dev world. We see a lot of people when you focus on certain types of telemetry data, like if you have like a flow of Splunk information or Palo Alto Networks, like the rate of change of that isn't that often. When you have an application log, as an example, or you have a number of application developers that are checking in however many times a day, every one of those check-ins is an opportunity for change. Every deployment is an opportunity for change. And so there's change detection as it relates to the performance of the system, but there's also change detection in terms of the structure of the data. Every time someone checks something in, they might change the way the file looks. They might change the way the metric looks. And so in this pipeline, we have the ability to alert and tell you there's been a change in the schema, a change in the payload of that was expected and things like that. So it's an early notification system on all those changes, which always break downstream systems.
Yeah.
Huge. Yeah.
Does it apply an electrical shock to the keyboard of the person who made that?
We have we have webhooks. And I want responsibility to actually deliver the electrical shock, but we can't trigger actions. That's up to you on which you trigger.
I mean, webhook sounds like that's all we need.
I think that could be arranged.
Kati Lehmuskoski here. You mentioned that companies need to own their telemetry data in the future. So why are you seeing that point being that important?
Well, yeah, good question. So I think it's important because there's two reasons. One, it's an enterprise asset, and two is it's like such a driver for cost and information that you need both, right? So it's interesting perspective for me because before we came to this conclusion, I spent 3 years running a log management company. I was storing people's log files for them. We still store people's log files for them. It's a good value-added service. But I was struggling alongside those customers with the amount of data that they were creating, the cost of that data, and their desire to control that data. And I think ultimately over time, in order to contain those costs and to make the most of that enterprise asset, it needs to be owned by a company. It's like, I don't want to pick vendor names, but you can pick, any of the large observability providers. Every time you send them all their data, it's their format. You're subject to their rates of innovation. You're subject to their cost models and their need to make a margin on that. And so I think over time, it's very important that enterprises, not that they wouldn't still send them their data, but they should be very deliberate about what data they send.
Is there awareness in general outside of the customers you tend to talk to of the value of telemetry data? Because it sounds like you're saying it's an underappreciated enterprise or organizational asset. Are you trying to?
Yeah, I think we're early.
appreciation?
Yeah, I think we're early in that for sure. I think we're early in that journey. I forget, that might have been on one of the slides, but the Gartner has a really strong prediction for the amount of telemetry pipelines that'll be implemented in the next 4 to 5 years. It goes from like less than 10% today to I think over 60% in the next 3 to 4 years. And one of their recommendations for future-proofing your observability investments, their number one bullet was implement a telemetry pipeline. So the way we think about it a lot is, I think about it as telemetry pipeline aware, which is a smaller set of people who have like identified that this is a need and they're pursuing it. And then there's telemetry data challenge aware, which is a much broader set of people today. And I believe the latter set is making its way to the former set. If that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, but I do think we're early. I think we've seen this happen on the business data side. It's not that much different than I need to take control of my business data. I need to put it in Snowflake or other data warehouses. I want to get stuff out of SAP as an example. It's just a different type of data, but the principles still apply. There's a lot of analog between both business and telemetry data.
I suppose there's a lot you can tell about the health of the organization just through telemetry data that right now is not being used in that way.
Yeah, there's a ton. I mean, in fact, one of our value props too is gaining business insights. So in that telemetry data, there's a lot of really interesting information that isn't caught on the business side that can be gleaned, aggregated, and extracted from that, and then brought into a context. And that's why it's not just an observability thing. It's not just a cybersecurity thing. It's important to be able to route this data to the appropriate consumer of that data. And those consumers are varied throughout the enterprise. So, yeah, thanks. Great questions. Okay, so some of the capabilities that we have that like will start to come out as Bill takes us through the use case and drills down into the app dev world a little bit more is we have this edge capability, which allows you to deploy it in a customer's environment. I've got a diagram that shows this, but we've found over time it's super important that people can put this on premises. So we put this on premises. It allows you to still manage it from our SaaS control planes. The data does not have to leave your environment. It can stay local. It can be processed locally and all that stuff, as you get the benefits of all the managed capabilities that we provide. Data profiling is something, as I mentioned before, we're super proud of, which allows you to profile the data not just once when you onboard data sources, but over time, because as we mentioned, the data changes. The mood of the data can change in various scenarios or outages or incidents or at various timeframes. So it's important to not be always profiling, but periodically profiling and making sure you're staying current and understanding. This is something we learned from interacting with our customers too. Massive drift in the amount of data they consume all the time. And all of a sudden people are in overages and having all these issues and challenges, and they dial them back. Our aim is to make that not a reactive process, but a proactive process.
And I assume you're going to get to it a little bit, but you're proactively providing recommendations on the profiling, or just providing tooling on how to profile? Both.
So yes, and then increasingly more and more, like one of our kind of internal North Stars is to really drive towards intelligence, right? Of course, you have to get, like I've kind of like thought about it in 3 phases. One is you have to get control over the data. Then you can shift logic to happen in real time on top of the data. And then you can create capabilities on top of that logic, and those capabilities would really drive intelligence and things like that.
Question.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Would you say that Mezmo is like the enterprise version of OpenTelemetry? Because with OpenTelemetry, you can of course just configure and install and deploy the open source piece of it. Would you say this is like the production or enterprise grade version of the open source version? Not that the
Yeah.
code is different, but like logically the way to think about it.
Yeah, like in its simplest form, I would say yes. I'm interested in what Bill would say. Because Bill knows a lot about open telemetry.
Yeah, there's ways that we could peel back that onion and kind of do a cross comparison. There's the operational aspect of running open telemetry and all the different collectors and managing that fleet of configurations and how they vary from one instance to the next. And then there's the community-driven aspect of open telemetry where it's a large engagement of contributors that are defining the standards for how we go about collecting traces, how we format our metrics, logs, that kind of stuff. And open telemetry is the leader in that space for sure. When it comes to operationalizing the collection of telemetry and how you operate on it before sending it to your telemetry tools, enterprise and Mezmo's telemetry pipelines really kind of help pick up where open telemetry is currently situated.
Yeah, it just takes what OTel is doing and makes it 20 times easier from what
Yes.
I've gathered.
Especially from a management
Large
operation.
management at scale for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And then a lot of these like kind of these things that sit around it.
Yeah.
Like that. So that's a great example when I said understand, optimize, and respond. OTel would sit like pretty squarely in that optimize phase.
Yeah.
But it's not going to help you with the understand part of it. It's not going to help you with the respond part of it. And there's an overall management policy. That was the previous slide, but we think a lot about policy enforcement and governance. So if you take a source, you can apply policy to redact the PII information, for example, and that way you know all the downstream consumers of that data flow will be compliant. So as an example.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So then another one that again, that would be like a big delta is like the actual ability to do in-stream correlation. So most of those are, while they're pipelines, they're a little more agent-based. We can consolidate all that, consolidate the streams of data, do correlation and cross-stream analysis of those things while they're in motion. So again, an example from one of our customers is they were storing all the database calls, which is hugely costly. They were able to store and aggregate the number of database calls, which gave the SOC the information they needed to make a decision. Is there something I need to investigate further? And we stored all the raw logs in like an S3 or a frozen tier that allowed them to go, search those logs later once there was a problem with they didn't have to put all of that into their SIM environment, for example, in a security context.
It's interesting, actually. I'll rephrase what I said before then. So OTel as a whole by itself, like it doesn't give you any type of management plane to be able to go in, like I can see here, see the system overview, see all the data, right? It's really just taking all the aggregation, collecting it into one location, and then sending it out where it needs to go. Mezmo is doing that, but it's also giving you the ability to see it from an observability perspective in the UI.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And we have it back in like the last one here. It's funny, like the probably right version of this is like a beautiful architecture, but like we've been really focused on driving the innovation and not all that yet. But the log analysis capabilities, we do have that data store that you can store and search and analyze. We find that most people use that with us on short durations of time. So we actually see it as a slight extension of the pipeline. There's no reason you should go store data for 90 days with like a vendor. They should put that in an S3 bucket and have the right facilities to rehydrate and do those types of things. So most of our customers are looking at like 1 to 7 day windows. And I think that's especially true in like the application development context.
Makes sense.
Like you've made so many changes after 7 days that like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do you actually need this data for?
What are you going to look at it for? What can I tell you?
Can you talk a little bit about what are you experiencing are the primary compelling events or use cases when somebody picks up
Great question.
the phone and says, "Hey,
Yeah.
Mezmo,
Yeah.
how
Let me-
soon
let me-
can you
let me-
how
I have-
soon
I
can
have
you
the
get
slides,
here?"
like 1 or 2 slides.
Okay,
So,
all right.
so we'll cover that, and then we'll
Great.
use that as a transition.
You had some good setup data for that. I was so
Yeah, no, great. Thanks for asking that, though. Last one on here is simulation. Like one of the things that's really hard about setting up a pipeline is you're interrupting mission critical data flows. All right, and so embedded in the product is the ability to create, test, do a lot of data quality management. Again, applying data engineering best practices, so you can create samples, emulate and simulate those samples, simulate what alerts they're going to create, and things like that. And so that's a big part of the value prop. Is actually just when we talk about the operational overhead, or how do I manage doing a change where I want to interrupt the data flow and deploy that to production. It's very important to have the right kind of controls in place. So Okay, and there's a bunch of other stuff, which we can go into another time. But. All right, just quick on the kind of architecture. The Mezmo analysis is what we talked about, our log analysis capability. The Mezmo pipeline is like the SaaS-based version of it. And then you have the agents, which could be OTel, could be one of the agents that you're using. We've studied Vector, we've studied OTel quite a bit as an input to what we built, Kafka and others. So there's like, pieces of all that included in our solution. This is how it looks in a SaaS model, but of course, not everyone wants to send all their data. I suggested it would be a bad idea to send all your data all the time to the cloud. And so the next one we have like what it looks like with the edge deployment, which adds on this delineation between sending data locally and keeping it locally, but still managing the configuration of one of the arrows is backwards. But actually it's not backwards. It pulls it back. So yeah. So that's the edge deployment. And I think finally we have the use cases, and I'll turn it over to Bill. So top use cases, I think you all might have had a presentation on AI before this too. Is that true? I'm sure you have. It's been like, there's a meeting, so you have to have talked about AI at some point. There's an interesting seventh one for us that's kind of brewing out there, which is what is the role of telemetry data in an AI model, and how do you keep it, tight, clean, trained, current, and all those things, and then make sure that PII is redacted from it too, so you have the right data sets in there. Maybe if you have an AI day, we can come back. But so top use cases we look at, cost reduction is, cost reduction I think is like almost like a funding event internally to make a change, right? No one wants to spend more money right now, but I don't think cost reduction is like what's driving people to adopt telemetry pipelines. It's just makes it more easy to do.
And with that though, you're suggesting like you were showing in the diagram where you can process data intelligently before you forward it off to Splunk or to
we reduced, Bill, what did we reduced our own logs? Like we're a logging company. We reduced by profiling our data and looking at it, I think we reduced our own logs by like 60%.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah.
I mean,
a lot of junk in there.
Yeah.
Developers are, never been known to be.
Well, but there's a reason for that Bill's going to come to. There's a reason for that. Yeah, that's actually a good tease where we're going. So we got cost reduction, ensuring compliance. So we'll be profiling the data for compliance and checking it and making sure there's no PII, PHI, and things like that leaking through the system. Business insights, we touched on a little bit earlier, where there's so much you can glean from this data too. So we can extract that data and turn it into metrics or send it on, aggregate it, turn it on to other locations. The orchestration of where the data goes is, I think, increasingly going to be, like, I think over a period of 2 to 3 years, you'll actually see data orchestration top to the top of the use case, and all of these will fit underneath it, which is basically how do I create a data fabric or a data layer that allows me to control or abstract where data is stored in my organization, but I can logically understand the format of it and make sense of it and get the most value out of it. And then, of course, improve security. And then finally, accelerate resolution time, which Bill's going to drill into. So I pushed you off to the last slide, though, but hopefully that got you what you wanted there.
I mean, out of these, what's the number one use case?
I think the ones, probably the top row right now, I would say. But like it's hard to, like, cost reduction kind of comes as a byproduct. So a lot of people, and we're very surprised by the number of people who do not have compliance in their data, and that has such a real and present kind of threat to that. And then business insights is a big driver of like how do I understand what both of those interestingly are problems that I would have suspected had been solved otherwise, but have not been solved within the telemetry data space. Well,
the thing I'm not quite firing all cylinders on is how you go from any one of those to, oh, what I need is observability for my engineering process to be able to fix that, right? How do people make that association to Mezmo and say that's exactly what I've been looking for,
I think that will, Bill, does that question make sense? I might actually get answered in like Bill has a bit of a setup about like the app dev, and I think that might get covered in there.
Yeah,
but
I'm just looking at it from if I'm running an engineering or app dev organization.
Yeah, so it's interesting, like, and as a point I should have made earlier, I think of us as a data company, not as an observability company or a cybersecurity company, or, it's like I think of us as a data company.
Your website says observability.
I know.
But
Yeah, well, Mitch, and actually to kind of build on what Mitch is talking about, what we found in our latest survey of 870 respondents, that 52% of respondents indicate that they're running 6 to 15 observability tools to get insights to what's happening in their organization.
Yeah.
Right. So when you look at that, and I look at your use cases, you're part of an ecosystem, and 6 to 15 tools, to Mitch's point. Right. That's
In observability, let alone cybersecurity.
right. Not
right?
just, yeah. So like across.
There's a whole nother problem.
Yeah.
Right. So it adds complexity, but I'm interested to hear like what Mitch was going, which is how does somebody go, I need Mezmo to get
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, what's the best way to connect the dots for you, you know?
One of the things that has come up a lot too is actually because people have 6 different tools, they have 6 different agents on all their
Sure.
They have 6 different pipelines moving through, and so this kind of data abstraction layer has been like, I want to put in OTel, I want to put in Mezmo, and then I want to let the business pick whichever of those 6 tools they want to pick. I no longer care because I've got a control point for those 6 tools. So that tool decision, like whether you want to use Datadog or New Relic, becomes relative to like whatever the business need is, whatever that particular organization wants to use. But the kind of platform engineering team and the engineering team has controlled the flow of data, and they send it to the right systems, and they can allow self-service and things like that if they get to that point. But like you open up the consumption of those tools and reduce the complexity and cost of all the different data flows. That makes sense.
Mostly makes sense. The thing that I'm stuck on is this is a kind of an emerging part of most businesses. It's immature in most businesses, and most organizations are doing point solutions to solve their problems.
Correct.
Right, and they're not integrated together.
Nope.
Right. I heard what you said. Like if you have a data platform. I think that's overcoming that hurdle of enabling businesses to understand, organizations to understand that a data platform is important so they can pick whichever tools they want to use.
Right.
But how do you get them over that hurdle?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of where I was. So it's a good conversation. That's where I was saying that data orchestration is kind of how I would put that. And I think the way that they get there is because they're worried about cost, compliance, or insights otherwise.
Well, but where's complexity in this? Because complexity seems to be one of your main challenges that you overcome.
Oh, yeah, like that's why the data orchestration, like basically you're orchestrating and helping people own that data across, like when you replace the agent collection with OTel, and when you put a data pipeline in front of it, you can pick whatever destination you want.
Yeah.
And so like that's part of what we mean by the data orchestration layer.
Okay.
It's like, to your point, it's not in the forefront yet because people are trying to solve more tactical problems today. Like they're trying to solve, like I have like a $10 million Splunk bill. I've got PII data in my log files.
Agreed.
I can't get insights into the number of baggage claim failures that happen. Like those are real things that we're working with people on right now. And ultimately it leads to things like the data orchestration, data fabric layer. Yeah.
So
I don't think we answered your question that though.
No,
Yeah.
we'll get there. We'll figure it out.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd love to see the demo because that
I think that'll
help
help
me
Yeah.
figure out how you're presenting it.
I'll just, full disclosure, Mezmo is a long-standing client of Techstrong. They do webinars with us. They do all kinds of things. And I think what Paul hit on is kind of feedback that we've been getting from the audience lately, which I don't know if it gets it up to you, the report.
No, I haven't heard it, but yeah.
The messaging is getting convoluted. People don't understand this. I don't think you use this slide. You're not doing it.
Yeah, we haven't used the slides, that's for sure.
But you're not using this slide. And so they're all, thanks, Mitchell. They're all over the place. Is this observability for developers on a shift left kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Is it an open telemetry replacement?
Yeah.
And they're getting hung up on all these things. And sometimes it's KISS, right? Keep it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know how many people are live streaming right now, but our roadmap is basically that we've created a really powerful platform over the last 2 years.
I know you have.
And the singular focus that we have in the next 2 months is enabling specific workflows on that. Because right now we could make it do anything.
Yeah.
right? And
No, I
making
think
it so
your
it's
technology's top notch.
yeah,
There's no doubt
Yeah.
about it. I think it's the messaging.
Messaging.
yeah.
It's also how you describe a solution development. Because I don't know if this is the right answer, what it is, but it's almost like you're the dashboard for the shop floor, right? Here's all the things that are happening on the software factory floor, whether there's security related, compliance, errors, meantime to repair, failures, whatever that is. I just need to know, are things flowing and where are there issues and how are they bubbling up to something I need to worry about? So I don't mean to oversimplify that it's a dashboard,
No, yeah,
but some visual way of like,
Yeah.
It's not all the data. It's the few things in the data I need to know
it's
about.
a few things in the data, and you need to know that the data is flowing and things like that. It's really about the data in motion. And there's a separate observability or cybersecurity problem that gets solved when the data's at rest.
Yeah, I've got a.
That we don't cover. It's
You could
really
do
about-
analysis on that to say, hey, we're seeing a trend.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.